This is question 2 of paper 2, which relates to the new specification for GCSE biology. It's a straightforward question, but it's still quite easy to mess up. Let's read through. It says the nervous system enables humans to react to their surroundings and to coordinate their behaviour. When a person's hand touches a sharp object, the person quickly pulls his hand away. This response does not involve the brain. The response is automatic. What name do scientists give to this type of action? Well, clearly it's a reflex action. Next question, what type of neuron carries nerve impulses from a touch receptor to the brain? And the correct answer there is the sensory neuron. And 2/3 of students got that correct, but 1/3 of students wrote the relay neuron. And I think that they were probably swayed by talking about in the brain, where it says touch receptor to the brain. Maybe that's what strayed them towards the relay neuron, because of course that's where they exist in the brain, connecting sensory neurons to motor neurons. The next question is really poorly laid out. Normally this would start at the top of a page. I don't know why AQA have done that. It's squeezed in at the bottom, but basically it's that old chestnut. You'll have done this experiment in class. If not, you can do it at home. 2 students investigated the positions of touch receptors in the skin. They used apparatus shown in figure 3. The apparatus was a bent metal hairpin. And D there is the distance between the 2 points on the hairpin. We do a similar thing using pins stuck into corks at school. Okay, student 1 was blindfolded. Student 2 set the distance between the points at 5 millimeters, touched the skin on student 1's fingertip with either one of the points or both points at the same time. So the student who was blindfolded didn't know whether it was getting 1 point or 2 points, and they had to be able to sense whether it was 1 point or 2 points. And the students repeated that 10 times. And the student 1 who was blindfolded reported how many points he'd felt. Student 2 then changed the distance, D, and repeated the experiment. And they recorded the minimum distance in millimetres at which student 1 could feel the 2 separate points on the fingertip. So they were changing that distance between the 2 points on the hairpin. Then they repeated the investigation at 4 other places on student 1's hand and arm. And they measured the distance in centimetres from the fingertip to each place tested. So we've got 2 lots of measuring going on there. The distance from the fingertip and also the minimum distance that was needed before it was felt as 1 point. So in other words, the minimum distance where it would be 2 points, and anything less than that, they would feel it as 1 point. And according to the examiner's report, very few students even attempted this question, and that is because they are looking there at some rather disorganised results. And this may appear how your results appear in the back of your book when you scribble them down without sticking them into a table first. They're not pleasant to work with. It's easy to make mistakes. But the question says, design a table for student 2's results and then put student 2's results into your table. There's only 2 marks. And this indicates that it should take you less than 2 minutes to do. So you're just going to quickly draw a table. I wouldn't even worry about a ruler, but you've got to think about where the marks are. The marks are going to be for units, and they're going to be for suitable column headings. So the first column, we're going to need 3 of them. We're going to label it location. Next one, distance from the fingertip, and we're going to put our units there as centimetres. Minimum separation detectable as 2 points in millimetres in the 3rd column. Then as we add our data, which is very disorganised, we're going to cross it off as we put it in. And we're going to put it in sequence, because when you turn over the page, you'll see you're asked to do a graph with this information, and not having it in sequence will make it confusing and difficult to work with. Now, if you remember with AQA, when you add wrong information, you can have marks taken away from you. So assuming you used suitable headings and you used the suitable units in the column headings as well, but then if you put the units in the body of the table, then you would have that mark disqualified. It would be removed. So note to self, units only in the column heading. And another note about the column heading, they can't be long enough. They can very easily be too short, but they can't be too long. Okay, moving on to the graph, it says draw a graph of student 2's results. Remember to choose a suitable scale for the vertical axes. It's been very kind to us because they've labelled the x-axis and done the scale. Label the vertical axes, plot the data from your table, draw a line of best fit. Okay, so hands up, it's early in the morning here and my graph is rubbish. That's my excuse. When I did my labelling of the vertical axes, it was too close to the axes and then my numbers were squeezed in. It looks messy. Additional to that, I cracked on with blind abandonment, not looking back to the question. And as you can see there, I didn't follow my own advice, which was to annotate and highlight the question as you move through it. And I should have noticed that it said, draw a line of best fit. Now, while a line can be a curve, it certainly can't be dot to dot, which is what I drew it as. Initially, and then tried to cover my tracks by making it look a little bit more freehand and going over it. And of course, engaging a brain cell, any Muppet can see there that that is a nice smooth curve. So a couple of things there. Note to self, make sure that you label your axes at some distance from the axes to allow the numbers to actually go on there. Make sure you annotate your question as you move through it, and don't get so carried away with the task in hand that you forget to look back to the stem of the question. And just to remember, a line of best fit doesn't mean a straight line. A line of best fit can be a curve of best fit. What conclusion can be made from the graph? Well, there's only one mark for that. So we could talk about a lot of things, but all we're going to say is the general trend is that the minimum distance detectable as 2 points increases as the distance from the fingertip increases. If there was more marks available, you might talk about the shape of the graph and the fact that it's starting to level out, but there's only one mark. And I have written the answer as it's written on the mark scheme, which is quite interesting because it doesn't actually fit on the printed lines. Anyway, moving on to the last question. Sometimes when both points were touched onto student 1's skin at the same time, student 1 only felt 1 point. Explain why. And there's 2 marks for that. So what we're going to say is it's because both points stimulate the same neuron. In other words, the receptors for that neuron are spread over a larger surface area. And so for the second mark, we're going to say because the points are too close together. And to try and support, not replace, but to try and support what I've written, I've drawn a little diagram there, which you can always do in an exam if you have enough time, just to show that how the pin would be felt as 1 point if the receptors were spaced apart, but if the pin was set at a broader distance, you would feel it as 2 points. I do hope the video has been of use to you. I think we're going to see these kind of questions more and more with AQA, i.e. drawing a graph and constructing a table with the correct column headings and units. So do brush up on those skills.